Hi everyone, so we had a lot of hotfixes over the last 2 days, well actually since launch. They have been continuously pushing out some updates. You might have seen some of those nerfs to Twisting Blades, to some of the barb stuff, and also they disabled and now re-enabled the Edge Masters aspect in particular. But a more important thing that I want to address here is that Blizzard keeps nerfing dungeons. So you might have seen some of those strategies revolving around Champion's Demise, especially for groups. That was a very valuable farming spot. This is how people reached level 100 for the first time by group split farming that dungeon, which is probably still one of the best strategies to level up if you want to try to reach 100 the fastest. But there have also been other dungeons that people were farming solo. For example, lately, Blind Burrows and Ruins of Eridu. So I tried this out for a little bit myself the other day on my other rogue, just for like half an hour or so to see how it is. And yeah, it was relatively valuable. So as a solo player, you could just like bounce back between the two dungeons. They're quite next to each other in Havazar. Now, both of these have been nerfed a little bit. I don't think that Blind Burrows is such a bad dungeon still, but apparently Ruins of Eridu is not really that great. And, well, personally I also found it to be relatively boring to farm these dungeons all the time without any other variety in the gameplay. But what I have been doing personally, probably almost more than anyone else in the world, is Nightmare Dungeons. And, well, I actually compared the pre-nerf Ruins of Eridu farm to my Nightmare Dungeon runs. And I gotta say that it wasn't actually that far off. So this dungeon here was maybe kind of simple, like an easy strategy. You know what you gotta do, you just go in there and blast. But now this has been changed and it's not as valuable anymore. And people keep asking me, where should I go now? What is the next best dungeon to farm? Or what is the next best strategy to farm? Well, I can tell you, Nightmare Dungeons are actually pretty good. And this is actually part of the main progression strategy. And it seems pretty clear that the developers also want you to not grind the same dungeon over and over. Personally, I find it quite boring, and I think this is also not really doing justice to what the game has to offer in terms of the variety of the different contents, the different dungeons, the different monsters that you can fight and all that. And just in general, I think that Nightmare Dungeons are just super fun with the affixes that kind of change around sometimes. One huge advantage of Nightmare Dungeons is that you can actually choose the difficulty level and the monster level that you find in those dungeons. Monsters are always exactly 54 levels higher than the tier of the dungeon. So for example here, this is a tier 36, plus 54 is 90. So I'm fighting level 90 monsters on my level 86 rogue. So I'm underleveled by 4 levels. Usually the optimal level difference to XP ratio is 3 levels underleveled. So for example, I should be running 35s. So character level minus 51. And at that point, I would gain plus 25% bonus XP compared to fighting monsters of my own level. And for example, if you do normal dungeons, monsters will be always of your own level, and you can't be underleveled. So despite the fact that I have nerfed some of those dungeons that people were farming, you can run Nightmare Dungeons, and they have been pretty much unchanged for the most part. So most of them were not really touched by any nerfs, and they are pretty much across the board pretty solid XP, at the very least for solo players. And in groups, they also have some other advantages, like you can share sigils, and you can actually run the same dungeons back to back with less travel time, or you can have one of the party members travel there while everyone else is sorting out the loot. So there are some other group efficiency factors as well. Nightmare Dungeons have been the #1 way for me to level up, and you also get a lot of loot. You get glyph XP, you have pretty massive bonuses that definitely boost your character's power, especially towards the higher end. So I think I actually kind of expected to have these glyphs leveled. Most builds probably run somewhere between like 4 to 5 glyphs, in some extreme cases even 6 or 7 glyphs, and those do take a long time to level up. So for tier 30 to tier 50 Nightmare Dungeons, you can expect something like 30 to 50 runs per glyph to max it out. So you have to calculate like a few hundred runs of Nightmare Dungeons that you have to do to even just level up your glyphs. And you don't want to start doing that at level 100. There's also something that I already discussed a little bit in my progression guide, you might have seen that. So usually, at least on your first character, you reach level 50 after the campaign or so. Then you do a capstone dungeon. You start working on Renown. Renown is definitely an objective you want to do before the big dungeon grind. But then once you're done with the Renown, you can basically go Nightmare Dungeons all the way to level 100. Or maybe do some other stuff in between if you like. You know, finish up some Renown, do some Helltides in between, do some PvP. You don't have to stick to this only, but in terms of XP farm, Nightmare Dungeons are really efficient. I'm actually going to work on a tier list for Nightmare Dungeons, so stay tuned for that. I want to rank them by character leveling, glyph leveling, and pushing viability. So these are probably 3 very different lists, and they require a lot of attention to detail to make. But yeah, I'm planning to put something out like that quite soon, so stay tuned for that. But at least for leveling, I can already tell you that there are some of my favorite dungeons that I have been running on stream as well to level up my first rogue to level 100 on hardcore, for example. Here's one of them. Earthen Wound is kind of nice. I kind of like Blind Burrows, Moorwood, Alderwood, Raven Wilds. So these are usually like the top dungeons that I like to run. And there's like some others that sometimes come in when I have some sigils left over, or I don't really like the ones that I have right now because they don't have like the right tier, or they have bad affixes, like Witchwater, Serpent's Lair, Onyx Hold, Sunken Ruins, and Lost Archives. So there's actually a pretty big selection of dungeons that I feel are well worth the time running, at least for XP. Sometimes they are also nice if you just have multiple sigils stacked up back to back. It might be worth going to some of those that I have not listed here. But I've been trying to benchmark the time spent traveling plus running the dungeon. But I've tried benchmarking the time spent traveling versus running the dungeon a little bit. And yeah, some of them are a little bit better than others. So those are just the ones I prefer. But in general, you can expect relatively comparable XP per hour values in running Nightmare dungeons, and you have a sizable XP boost. A lot of people also ask me, is it worth to be extremely underleveled? So for example, see here, I fight level 93 monsters that are 7 levels above my character. So there is no penalty applied to fighting high level monsters. You only get a bonus. But as I mentioned, you want to be underleveled by exactly 3 levels, because this is where you get a maximum bonus of plus 25% XP. And beyond that, you barely get more XP. The monsters scale up slightly in their base XP value that they give you with higher levels. But for example, if I get 25% more XP by 3 levels behind, I would get maybe something like 30-35% or so being 7 levels behind. So the difficulty ramps up really fast and the rewards very slowly. This means you don't want to go really out of your comfort zone for running those Nightmare dungeons. Always focus on the speed more than fighting extremely high level monsters. But if you can afford it, if your build is like super powerful and you easy blast through monsters 10 levels above you, then go ahead. In any case, just wanted to put this out here for all the people that have questions about where they should farm and what they should do. If you want to see more details, I have this 1 to 100 progression guide that I made the other day, so you might want to find some tips there as well. And that's it. Hope you enjoyed this video. Wish you good luck with your farming, and see you guys next time.